start today by charging again that the traveling medicine show guys, right? Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris.
Both living.
Okay,
I got to get this
And
straight.
the other two are deceased, which would be Stephen Hawking and Christopher Hitchens.
Okay.
Right, so I'm saying they're like an old-time medicine show troupe going city to city. Only in their case, they go campus to campus, right? Or convention of fans to convention of fans, and they just do what? I'm just telling you, they sell snake oil to young people mainly. They also, when you have fans, you can sell refills of snake oil, right? That's really what they're doing, okay? It cures everything from common sense to reason to rationality. Anything that might make you look like you're hungry for evidence, right? These guys will sell you this kind of a formula. Now they do it, and I can give you some of the ingredients. How about these? They'll quote Voltaire, which I'm going to do myself in the next segment, and they'll say things like, anybody, folks, listen to me closely, anybody who can get you to believe absurdities, right, can get you to commit atrocities. Now, they usually trot that out as their own, which I don't, I like attributions to be where they belong. But the people always are happy with that little slogan. These guys are slogan chuckers. Okay? Elitist slogan chuckers. And what I mean by that is they think you're stupid.
Okay.
I just think you're gullible and lazy. I'll say it over and over. You just don't care enough to look into these things, or you'd understand right away they think they're duping you. They're frauds, and they're deceitful, and I can prove that to you.
It'd be a simple
Right?
Google,
Now,
right? Just to look up some of these things they're saying and find
but
out
you
who's
have
saying
to-
them. And
You have to know that what's behind it, right?
Okay, the motivation.
Yeah, because they do have an agenda. It's always good to know why the guy's buying you roses, right? In my case, it's usually an apology. But suppose that I'm dead and you're getting courted by the next Bill, Elmer, and he buys you
Elmer.
roses. It might be that he wants your affections, right? Yeah, and then he'll move on to the repentant stage later in that idea. But so I'm saying that because when I say it strongly, I wonder. I was thinking this morning, do I say it too strongly?
What are you saying too strongly?
They're frauds.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason I say it is they're charlatans I like better than frauds. And it's like this. Like yesterday when I asked you about the difference between falsehood and lying. A lot of would-be atheists, right, young, aspiring, and kind of the spouting atheist.
The kids.
Yeah, they will say things, and I know they're mistaken, and they just are not factual about it, and I'm okay with that. What I don't like that Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins do is, one, they know what I think about something. Like they'll say all the time that I have faith without any reason to, and I don't care about the evidence. I don't even care if it's against the evidence. I'm just a blind adherent. Well, they know that's not true, but they sell that to you. When they do that, what they've done is they're masters of building straw men. And a straw man is just a simple, fallacy, really, and this is an informal fallacy where you build a little man up and give him these attributes, and then you tear him down. But he's a little easier to tear down than Bill Moore is sitting in the room. You see, so you misstate what I believe purposely.
Okay.
And you do it purposely.
So the straw man is the other person's set of beliefs,
it's
supposedly.
like if I took the worst atheistic argument I've ever heard, and I've heard some awful, stupid ones, and if I just trot that out and say, here's what all atheists believe, right? Well, that's not fair.
No.
I'm building up a straw man myself, and I'm going to destroy the straw man. Okay? Well, that's not the way honest men travel, right? But dishonest men travel around their little buckboard in the Old West, and they'd go town to town with a bunch of goofballs and coming into town on the weekend, right? And they'd sell them snake oil and make their wife prettier. It'd make them grow taller. It'd cure their warts or their gout. It cured everything. And normally they cured it really by bringing a little piece to them through alcohol or codeine or, some sort of a drug. And you're like, they just bottled that. It was before patent medicine. So they'd always claim it was patented.
Right.
But it wasn't patented except by their
Right.
wife or girlfriend or whatever each other. But you see, they could put anything basically in it, and if they put a little opium in a thing, well, you might go out of there feeling a little better than you did, and not quite as despondent, but
That's the Old West, yeah.
It's the Old
Google
West.
it,
and
yeah.
because and you can see those shows. So when I get my banner made with their faces on it, you'll see what I'm talking about in figure. But I say it because I want to make sure that I'm harsh where harshness belongs,
Right.
and fair where fairness belongs.
True.
And when it comes to them, and I say, I was asking myself, is charlatan, which means chatterer, if you remember, is too strong? The answer is no. I'm very fair with it. It's about as kind as I'll get. Fraud might be only when Sam Harris and Dawkins really set out, Christians used to do it all the time, to really misstate what a Christian believes.
Right.
That's fraud.
Yeah.
I mean, they know
Yeah.
better. You
Right.
understand? They're not doing it blindly.
Right.
So, and that's deceitful. They've only why would they deceive a young person and not be fair-minded? Well, one, you might assume that the weakness of their case demands that you
yeah.
kind of pad it up a little bit,
Oh,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So first instinct is to look at it and say, maybe the guy boasting about how many gallons of oil are coming out of that hole in Texas, maybe he's padding that a little bit, right? Because he wants to win me over to this idea to invest in the next round of wells. It's that kind of a pump-up
Right.
deal.
Right.
So if he can say it, like yesterday when we saw the professor who was more than willing to lie to college students in the beginning, just as long as they come along
Right.
and don't become a creationist.
Right.
Well, that's an awful.
It was worth
I mean,
doing the
how
lies. Yeah,
how
yeah.
deceitful is that?
Right, no.
Now, I'm not saying every atheist does that, but I'm
Right.
saying a substantial number. And Sam Harris ought not to do it. He ought to be better than that. And what he does, if you look up what a charlatan does, he'll also withhold what he knows if it works against him.
True.
It's just dishonest to do that.
Right.
So if I know that there are things that kind of favor the atheistic view, I will state it.
Right.
I'm not afraid of that
No.
because in the end, I know that the argument is stronger for my position
Right.
than that position. But I try to make sure I'm not dishonest. Now, I will poke fun at them, right? But I just want you to know I've thought it through this morning. And of course,
Yeah.
if somebody gets irritated, it's sort of like the person who gets most irritated by fraudulent people is somebody who's been a fraud.
Exactly.
And since I qualify for that, and I was thinking this morning, I know sometimes you hate these stories, sometimes you don't.
Oh, I probably will. Okay, here
All
it
right,
comes.
I'm going to be light on you. I'm going to give you the wizard one because people like the wizard. That one is not obnoxious, okay, like some of them. So,
Yes.
but the wizard one, right, is where we used to go into a tavern, right, and we would play the strangers. All of these depend
This
on
is
being
before
strangers.
Lois.
Before Lois
I'm
and
gonna
before
make
I
a
was,
disclaimer right
before
here.
Christ.
Okay. Yeah, before
Yes.
Christ. Even
when
more
I was a devout
importantly.
atheist.
Yeah, you're
so
right.
we go to some town, and the thin man would go in first, right, at 4 o'clock.
The thin man, he's your buddy.
Yeah, and then I'd come in about 6, and sometimes we had the really old guy traveling with us, he'd come in later because he drank too fast, and he was useless when he got drunk.
Oh.
But the first one I would try is we would be talking about predicting things. I'd start this conversation with strangers, and we never knew each other. We were always 3 strangers, right? That's the gimmick. So we would do this thing where I'd say pretty soon, I was reading this thing about ESP. Somehow that would always work its way into there. And then the thin man would kind of join the group on the periphery, and he'd be like, what are you talking about? I'm like, finally it would come down to this. After I was claiming either before or against, it didn't matter. I could take either position. I would eventually say, I don't hate to say it, but I do know a guy, I'm telling you, who can pick a card out over the phone. Right? That's what I would do. So the thin man would be like, no way. Now he's going to argue with me, right? The other stranger. Normally, like Sam Harris does it, he counts on dupes in the audience, right? And he's got some shills out there, just like, but the people never noticed, or seldom. A couple times they did, and that ended badly for us. But they would seldom notice that we were the 2 strangers in the room.
Yeah.
Right? They just assumed, because the thin man was good at this. And so we'd argue back and forth, and pretty soon we'd bet $200, or depending on the crowd. Some of them were $50 crowds, some were $500 crowds.
Yeah.
So we would bet, he and I, and what's human nature?
I'm going to join in.
Herd instinct.
Herd
It's what
instinct,
Sam Harris depends on.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Somebody claps, and then everybody's like, "Oh, we got to clap."
College
Ooh,
students,
yeah.
he thinks, don't have the courage to stand up
Oh, they
against
don't.
it. So they just join in.
Yeah, most
There's
of them
a
don't.
human herd instinct.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you bet 500, how much do you think the average guy in a working class bar is going to bet? Not the 500. He'll bet an increment down or two from
Yeah.
that. Normally about
Safe.
2. So his max might be $50.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay? But he's got friends. And if all of them, you were better off if you had 8 guys at $20 because somebody would join in the $50 or $100 club, and everybody in the joint would be betting.
Yeah.
Then what I would do is reach in my back pocket and fish out, after some trouble, a matchbook cover had this guy's number on, the wizard. Right?
The
So I
wizard.
would call the wizard, right?
In front of everybody.
In front of everybody. And then normally somebody would say, right then, wait a minute, don't let him, because we'd have the cards, right? And you'd shuffle the cards, and you'd be over there, and I'd say, just go ahead and pick one. I always like the girl to pick them, right? Because if you
course
could
you
get
did.
a pretty girl involved, everybody liked the whole thing better. So,
You're a mess.
so they would hold the card, right? And I'd say, let me have the card. And they'd be like, no, don't let him touch the card. See, they were trying to figure out
What's the trick?
if there's a trick.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
So
sure.
I'd say, okay, you go ahead and hold it, Juliana. Okay, just hold it. Let me see it, right? So I'd see the card, and then I'd say, okay, turn the back of it away from the phone for a minute, right? It didn't matter. You could tell her to twirl around, and just whatever you felt like. But so then what would happen is I'd dial a number, phone rings, I'd say, hello, is the wizard there? Right? So I'd wait for the wizard to come to the phone. When the wizard comes to the phone, somebody would inevitably say, don't let him talk to him. Right? And say, hang on a minute, And then somebody come over, and the wizard would say, put the card face down on the speaker. Right? So you put it face down. And then he'd do some of the stuff. Sometimes he'd have them whistle, sometimes depending on whether he was stoned or not at the time. And occasionally he'd be so stoned he'd forget what the deal was. But we could always call back and win it back. But so then what had happened is he would announce the card, and the thin man would get angry and pay me. And then everybody would pay. Okay? So we could do that usually twice over a period of a couple hours. We had other ones going on in between.
Of course
So
you did.
that's when things got tough. That's kind of what we did. Now, that one you probably still don't remember.
I kind of remember. I've heard
remember how
this
it
story. So you're going to tell the secret?
No.
I wouldn't.
So, but remember when Dr. Zander wanted to use it in Costa Rica? Remember he was trying to figure it out. Then when he saw how it worked, he liked it even better. I think
I
because
think he
it's
did.
manageable. But
Yes.
if somebody really needs to know, you can get a hold of me and I'll tell you. But
Don't go down this path.
you might. It still works.
I know. Don't go
So,
down this path.
At any rate, I say that because we traveled around doing that
Yeah.
because we were stooges.
Yep.
And it was hard to get people to gamble on pool and other things that you could kind of control. So we had to come up with these strangers at the bar things. And remember the dice one where 8 people in what position? And Marcy told me the crooks are, if there's 8 people at a bar playing a dice game, and I said, which ones are the crooks? If there's 3 crooks who don't know each other.
This is my friend in Chicago.
And
Sharp,
Marcy
cute
said,
little girl.
Marcy Kosher.
Used to, her dad used to have a carny.
Yeah,
it was a carny. Yeah.
So she got it right off. She was raising a carnival, and she's like, the first guy, the 5th guy, and the 8th guy.
I know. I
And-
was like, huh?
Yeah. And so she
You
was
too.
really, she
You're
was
a
really good
mess.
at it. I say
Yeah.
that because nobody
Yeah.
hates a fraud and a deceitful person more than somebody who's
Yeah.
been
Who's been one?
fraudulent and deceitful.
Be you.
So that's why I've got my eyes open
Yeah.
for them.
Well, no, you spot it.
Right.
You can see it.
I
Yeah.
see it more
You
quickly.
smell it. Yeah, I don't-
I just don't. There's something about that guy doesn't ring right.
yeah.
His hands didn't move.
You do it all
right,
the
whatever.
time in life. Something you're like,
Yeah.
watch that one right there, and it's like, oh,
Something
right.
strikes me.
Yep.
So it's instinctive because I spent so many years doing it.
Yeah.
Now I say that because today I want you to focus on a really famous story, and so I want you to see the parallel I'm going to draw between the traveling medicine show guys, especially Harris and Dawkins, and the guys in this story. And it's a very famous story. It's really, I guess, if you think about it, the most famous American novel really is Huck Finn. Right,
Yeah.
written by Twain. It's published in 1884.
I'm even aware of it.
Yeah, it takes him about 10 years to write this book because he has to almost rewrite it. He doesn't at the end. He's not sure he recognizes it. What started off as a kid's story turns out to be a wonderful, complex thing involving a lot of statements about slavery and blah blah blah. So, but you can, if you read it once in a while. Huck's a great book. I still love to read the book. It makes me laugh whenever I read it, and he's so adept at weaving this tale. So what happens in this story, they have all kinds of adventures. Now, Jim, the slave, and Huck are on a raft, and they're going to try to go down, they're in Missouri, they're heading down, they're trying to catch Cairo to go to the Ohio River, but a storm comes, and they actually end up going down the Mississippi, which is a bad news thing for Jim the slave. Right, so they have to change their story. But along the way, this raft, they pull in, and there's two guys kind of running from the town. And now these two guys don't know each other at the moment in this town. Both of them are kind of raggedy looking. But they're obviously running from the town's people. It's not just the town, okay? So they get them on the raft, and right away these frauds who don't know each other sort of team up, and they're both frauds. And one of them introduces himself, the younger one, he's about 30 years old, he introduces himself as the Duke of Bridgewater. Okay, so he's going to be royalty. Now, the reason they want to be royalty is because they want Jim and Huck to
serve
them. Yeah, that's exactly right. So now what happens, the other guy, because he's pondering the young man's claim.
Yes.
So he's going to one-up him because he's
a human.
He's an older fraud. So he says, well, that's wonderful because I'm the Dauphin, Dauphin, Dauphin it's pronounced. The Dauphin, right, of France. That's the eldest son of the king. Okay? So now he's running, they're both claiming to be on the run because of people pursuing him because they're going to take over these countries. So he just one-upped his young friend. He's about 70, this guy.
Yeah.
Right? So now he's real royalty. And in the story, Huck tends to call him the king instead of the Dauphin. Okay? But because he's the king in waiting sort of thing.
Right.
And Huck eventually figures out it's all phony. He's pretty sharp on those things. But Jim doesn't really know that. So they're kind of waiting on these guys, and Huck just plays along and joins in with them, in fact, and the frauds. So I'm saying that now because it's I think Dawkins is 80 and Sam Harris is 54 right now, I think. And this is September of 2021. Okay. So I want you to see that they travel not together, but they could, and they'd be magnificent, just like the Duke and the King here in the story. So what's funny about this story and the parallels is they go and do this little, what they call a, they had the camp meetings, like little religious meetings, in these little villages. So they need some money. So the king he goes into the camp meeting and joins in, and then he tells them the sad story that he's a reformed pirate.
Oh.
Now, the one thing I left out about his claim to be the Dauphin, the heir to the French throne, he couldn't speak any French, of course. But that wasn't a big stone in this story because Huck and Jim aren't the best audience, right? They're not the smartest audience to ask the right questions. Yeah. So they're traveling along like this. They're defrauding little defraudings, and then they hit on this town, and this is where it gets to be like they've gone to another campus, like Sam does, right? Campus to campus, crusades that these guys have, like Billy Graham crusades. Yeah. So you
with
see
their little
it.
Books and stuff
sure, they got
sell.
books and they got their wares, their little snake oil books. And so what ends up happening is they wind up in this little town, and they put on this thing where they say, we're going to put on these Shakespearean plays. Well, they're just making stuff up, but they realize they're better together than apart, right? So first night, they try this highfalutin made-up Shakespearean play. About 12 people come, and nobody cares. But these guys are frauds, and one thing about frauds, if the first one doesn't work,
Come up with another plan.
come up with another plan. So they come up, and here's where it's pretty clever. So now they decide that these people are really stooges, no class.
Yeah.
What they're going to do is they're going to put on a play for 3 nights only. Okay, so that's what you want. You want to limit.
Okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So then what they do is they make up a wonderful advertising scheme. What they do is they say, no women and children allowed.
Oh, that's funny.
Right? Because human nature is
like why? What? Is something?
Now there's something going on
Something
that I
going
have
on.
to get to.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen.
Oh, that's hilarious.
It kind of reminded me, remember that time I did the Michael Jordan ad?
Oh, let's not even talk about that.
Okay. But it was a winner.
It was a
by
winner.
human nature,
Yeah,
right?
you'll have to ask him in person about that one. That's
So
hilarious.
It reminded me of that.
Yeah.
Right. So
You're a little huckster, you.
yeah, I was still doing that, but that one wasn't illegal.
No.
What happens is the people are so taken by this thing that they can't really let the wife and children into.
Yeah.
That they sell out right away the first night. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So here's what it is. It's called the Royal Nonesuch.
Okay.
Right?
This is the show?
Yeah, Nonesuch.
Nonesuch.
Now, Nonesuch really, because I got intrigued by that, it actually means like there's none like him, like God would be the Nonesuch, really. But it's an old-fashioned word.
Okay.
And it was something they said about somebody, I guess, who was really superior at something. This guy was called the Royal Nonesuch. Now, it wouldn't have meant anything to those people in that village.
No,
it just
they wouldn't have
sounded
even known
funny.
what.
So
Yeah.
it sounded good.
Yeah.
So what happens is they all come to this thing expecting this big to-do. Yeah, the Royal Nonesuch. And the young guy, right, collects the tickets, and then he gets up on the stage and makes this lengthy, blowhard speech, right, repeating the same stuff. I don't understand because this is Sam giving the same speech, about the absurdities and atrocities that Voltaire talks about. And then he's going to say, Bill's so intrigued by this blind faith. So he gets onto those things that he knows aren't true. And he spins these yarns one after another, and they're the same ones over and over, right?
Just repackaged a
So
bit.
if you brought up the Seattle Mariners to him, or the Seattle Seahawks, it doesn't really matter. Sam's going to jump into, what's curious about that. The Seahawk reminds me of Bill's belief in, and you're like, what? Sam just strings these things together, and when you're he does it earnestly.
Yeah.
Now Dawkins is sort of clownish about it when you walk. I can't help that. It just sounds that way to me when he does it. He sort of has this squeaky British thing he does. But
Stop.
yeah, and I'm not altogether certain it's not a fake British accent, even though he's British.
Okay.
But I would ask him
see.
that in person.
Yeah.
So
Too funny.
what happens is, after this lengthy speech, the curtain opens and the king comes out buck naked and just prances around and occasionally gets on all fours. And he doesn't say anything. He's just prancing around buck naked on the stage.
Weird.
So that goes on for a while. And then, ta-da, the show's over. Now, the crowd is stunned, but not in a good way. So they decide they're going to what? They're going to rush the stage and do harm to the king before he can get his pants on.
Yeah.
So what happens is, instead, one guy walks up in front and says, hang on a minute. And he says, look, we've been
duped.
We've been duped tonight.
We're made a fool of here.
We're going to be the laughingstock of the village.
Right.
Right? And that's no good. They'll never get over how stupid we were to buy tickets to this thing. And beating these guys up is not going to solve it.
Yeah.
So I've got an alternative plan. We have been duped. The only way out of this, in a lifetime of being teased about it, is to have others join in with being duped. Now we got the college campus thing going, see?
Yeah.
Where we can invite your friends
Yeah.
day 2 of Sam Stays Another Day.
Right.
And now you won't feel like you're alone in being swindled. You can have them with you.
Yes.
Okay? So now, this really, it builds the excitement for
Why
everybody.
not? Yeah.
We're triumphant over this false man that Sam's built up as a Christian.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And Sam picks some guy from Podunkville and his quote to use, right? Just like I could.
Yeah.
But I try to stay away from that. It's too easy. you know?
Yeah.
So that's why I go after their captains, right? Their prophets.
Yeah.
So when you see this, you realize the next day they go out in the village and they say, There was nothing like this none such, royal none such. And they play it up. Well, guess what happens? They sell out the second night.
Oh, no.
So at the end of the second night, these second night guys say, the first night guys duped us. But now we've both been duped. There's still a group out there that's going to be able to laugh at everybody. So we need to follow suit and get the rest of the village to come on the third night. So they go out and play it up, right? And sure enough, they sell out again on the third night. Only here's where the deceivers know better.
Yeah.
Right, than the stooges.
Yeah.
The stooges are still stooges. Now, Huck's watching all this.
Yes.
Jim's on the raft, and Huck's concerned. I'm not sure Jim is on the raft. I think he is. Maybe he's not. But at any rate, Huck's concerned because he can see under the crowd's clothing on night 3.
Yeah, they've got some stuff that really...
Rotten vegetables, right?
All kinds of
all
things.
Kinds of things they're going to bombard these morons with, right? The fraud guys. So what happens is, before the Duke can give his little speech, he says, hang on a minute, there's a couple of preparations to make with the royal none such. And then he comes and says to Huck, and Jim, I think, is actually with him, and he says, we got to skedaddle. So they race off with the proceeds, right? And the way he secures the crowd to thinking he wouldn't do that is when he goes backstage, he pays a guy a quarter to collect the rest of the tickets. See, why would he give him that if all the tickets weren't collected? Well, he's collected 90% of the tickets. And he's willing to sacrifice the last 10 because he knows human nature. That not waiting for the last dime made the people think he wouldn't run out.
Right.
Well, he runs back they run to the... Now, Huck's worried about the king and how he's going to catch up. And the king's already on the raft.
Oh, for goodness sake.
Yeah, he's just waiting on the raft. And they're 10 miles down in the dark and down on the next swindle. Okay, now I'm saying that because...
Boy, Mark Twain, he was genius with that. He knew human nature, didn't he?
He thought the crowd... Yes, he knew.
Yeah.
And he knew the crowd was a group of stooges. I don't know what happens when you have stooges, plural. I guess it's just stooges. You can't have like stoogei.
Stoogeies.
Yeah. So the stoogei was... So what you see is... you see this thing in the atheists do it. They give you the slogan. So what I'm saying to you, if I'm wrong, you can call me on it, but I dare you to watch their presentation at some college, Campbell College or whatever college they're visiting,
right,
and watch the repetitive nature of it and how they never question their own beliefs. See, they never point out that some Christians, like for instance, I have to say all the time, some Christians actually do have blind faith.
Yeah.
Now, Christianity doesn't believe in blind faith, but it doesn't mean that some Christian sitting somewhere on a tractor
would
right, or a
think they have blind faith because they don't need, they're confused.
Yes,
yeah,
they're
they don't
confused.
understand.
We run into it all the time, and we try to correct it.
Right.
Right? But that's not the main.
No.
Historic Christianity is a wonderful thing.
Yes.
And it's and I mean wonderful on every level of intelligence, right? Some of the absolutely greatest minds that have ever existed, far greater minds than Sam or Richard Dawkins, by the way, somebody like Jonathan Edwards.
Yes.
Or you'd see a guy like Augustine or John Calvin or Martin Luther. You'd see these guys have covered every base, right? They don't just have a single stupid
stick.
Hope. Their hope would be desire and expectation. It's a biblical concept. It's not hope like I hope that the lottery comes through for me. You know, it's not that kind of deal.
No, wishful thinking.
No, but and these guys know it, but they give you the other version of it because it fits their little slogan.
Yeah.
See? So I'm saying I'm not being unkind when I say they're slogan chuckers. That's really what they are, elitist slogan chuckers. And if you're in a crowd, you ought to once in a while raise a question where smirking at you isn't sufficient, where you can actually stand up and say, this man brought up this idea, tell me where he's wrong. He's accusatory towards you about this, tell me where he's wrong. And don't settle for the smirk. Yeah. Because
or the name calling, or just
they do the smirking. No, what they do is they do this. It's like they have like Johnny Appleseed. They have a bag of little go-tos, like they're throwing seeds out to these children, and then when somebody even questions any of the quality of the seed, they do this.
Well, when you're a public
Look,
intellectual.
Look, I'm the public intellectual. I'm the bright in this group, right? I get what you mean. Like, I see where it's hard, but what they mean and infers, when you grow up and think as well as I do and come over to the dark side, in their case, they think they're bringing them to the light, they claim. When you get over here far enough on the dark side, you'll understand these mysteries, in the meantime. Right.
I experienced that. I was on that cruise with all the Harvard and Yale professors, and anyway, I asked a question because they were atheist. I went to one of their church services on board, and I asked a simple question to this guy, and he goes, "Oh, darling, you never would understand that. That's you just know." And he threw out some big word, and he said, "I'm sorry, you would never get it." And it's like, oh my goodness, that was an evasive. Just can't answer me.
So if you're a Christian, what I want you to do. These guys are all over YouTube.
Yep.
Don't be afraid to watch Sam Harris and listen to him.
Yep.
But as I've said to you, if you're going to listen to Sam give his spiel, right, at University of Illinois, you also want to couple that with a simple, what he's particularly poor at is when he's asked a question in the middle of his spiel when he has to have a conversation. And like I'm saying, then you want to tune into his Jordan Peterson, Sam Harris kind of talks.
He can't have a conversation. I notice he gets flustered. He gets angry. He does. Yeah. He can't just have that. I've watched him, and what do I know? But he's just like, I can't. He just pulls out his angry, frustrated. You're being accusatory.
And it's hard for him because he
doesn't know how.
He wants respect from Jordan Peterson,
right?
Who is
they're friends.
Respectful, but gives him a couple of things like, Sam,
does something isn't working out.
This is what I think you're drawing this conclusion, aren't you? Or this is this is a slippery slope, and
Jordan
if you come
does
down
really
here,
well with him. Aren't
we going to end up here?
Yeah.
Well,
just conversation.
And you're talking about a man in Peterson who's no Christian. Right. Now, he's come to believe that God must exist, but that's a step in the right direction. But people act like that's a conversion. It's not. It's just a step into rationality. He's just saying it must be so.
Yeah.
Right. If I said to him, even if I had to have met God, which is Sam's version of it, wouldn't you be okay with that? He'd be, we need some order.
Right.
I can't stand chaos.
Right.
So
there is design. I mean, Jordan sees there's design out there.
Somehow. But I wouldn't get too excited about his conversion yet. Because he's not. So I'm saying all that because these guys, and it's going to be a recurring thing, I want to clear the air that these guys are no better than charlatans. Now, that's a harsh thing, and if I can't prove it to you over a series of these things, then I want you to call me on it, right? But I'm asking you to make sure you know what a charlatan is. And if Sam knows that there's evidence against his case and he doesn't bring it forward, if Sam knows that's not what I believe and he builds a straw man, you tell me if Sam evades the questions that are really tough. If you know all three of those things, look up charlatan and you'll find out that's what a charlatan does. Okay? So that won't be the last time you hear it from me until I get them in their little ringmaster outfits and all that stuff for the traveling medicine show. Okay?